As the remaining bits of wood from my cabin came tumbling down towards the lake, I observed the victorious grin spreading across the excessively made-up face of our HOA queen and her bouquet of sycophants clapping. They believed they'd emerge victorious. What they failed to realize was that I had been quietly recording all of it, every threat, every move. Where are you seeing this video from? Drop a comment below. A position of power normally carries with it responsibility, but sometimes it also comes with the chance to teach bullies a lesson. And trust me, when you choose the wrong person to mess with, the consequences can become really interesting. The battle had only just started, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. I recall the day I made up my mind to construct the cabin as if it were yesterday. 3 years since my wife Claire passed on. Due to cancer, I was eventually set to realize the vow I had made to her someday. Matthew, she'd said on one of her good days in treatment, we'll construct that small cabin near the lake where Lily can grow up, admiring sunsets just like we did when we first met. She never did get to experience that dream become a reality, but I was not going to let it slip away for our daughter. As the county's land permit director, a job that I had done for 15 years, I knew just exactly how to do everything by the book. I carefully filed all the correct permits, double-checked property lines, and ensured every last requirement was satisfied. The land by the quiet, peaceful small lake bordering our primary property was ideal, beautiful, technically beyond the Whispering Pines' state HOA jurisdiction, but I knew they would never look at it that way. The day we began construction was memorable. 12-year-old Lily, my creative and wise beyond her years as daughter, donned her guard's old straw hat and ritualistically shoveled the first shovelful dirt. "Mom would love this, Dad," she said with that smile that always made me think of Claire. We had invited just a few close friends, George Edwards, the 65-year-old former county commissioner who now owned the local hardware store and had given me my first government job, and Jessica Morgan, my neighbor, and a real estate lawyer who lived in the next-door neighborhood. It was a lovely spring day with just the right amount of breeze to keep the insects at bay. We had only just set down the foundation markers when I noticed her coming our way. Amber Patterson, 38 years old, co-president of Whispering Pines, wearing what looked like a knockoff designer jacket with impractical high-heeled boots, wholly inappropriate for walking along a lakeside building site. "What do you imagine you're doing, Matthew?" she shouted, not even going to the trouble of exchanging a greeting. The oversized sunglasses settled above her nose couldn't conceal the disapproval emanating from her face. Her bottle blonde hair with dark roots swaying as she tapped her foot impatiently on the earth. "This is obviously against HO rules. Section 23.4 explicitly states that everything construction has to be sanctioned by the board, which, as you are aware, is me behind me," I overheard George snort softly. Amber had a bad name in the neighborhood, ex-middle manager for a big real estate company, until her controlling nature landed her ass out on the street. Now she funneled all that energy into micromanaging our community as if it were her own kingdom. "Actually, Amber," I said coolly, "this parcel is beyond the HOA boundary. I've reviewed the original county survey maps. But even if it weren't, I've obtained all the I stood my ground of paperwork, knowing full well that as the county's land permit director, I had done everything painstakingly correct the following day. I wasn't surprised to receive an HOA violation notice in my mailbox, requiring me to stop construction immediately, or else fines up to $500 a day. I tossed it in the recycling bin without hesitation. What surprised me was the emergency HOA meeting Amber called 3 days later, where she defined my humble cabin project as a threat to the property values of our community and an eyesore that will ruin the carefully manicured look of Whispering Pines. I went to the meeting attempting to keep my professionalism intact in the face of ridiculousness of it all. The cabin is being constructed to code using natural materials that are in harmony with the surroundings. It's a tasteful little building on my own land. I told the room full of approximately 20 neighbors. Some nodded in agreement, others quite. Amber's devoted disciples scowled. Brett Wilson, Amber's 48-year-old deputy and local gym chain owner, stood up next to her, arms crossed over his chest. "Rules are rules, Matthew. Just because you work for the county doesn't mean that you're better than them." The meeting escalated from there, with Amber stating she would do whatever it took to halt my project as, I was leaving. Jessica approached me in the parking lot. Matthew, I don't want to hear that Amber has a history of pushing things too far. I valued her concern but wasn't concerned. What can she actually do? I have all the approvals. The property legally belongs to me. The cabin complies with all code standards. Jessica didn't seem convinced. Just be careful, that woman has already made enemies of half the neighborhood. A week later, I realized what Jessica meant when I got a formal letter from a law firm acting on behalf of the HOA threatening litigation for repeated offenses. The signature in the bottom left belonged to Scott Patterson, Amber's husband and business partner at his corporate law firm. This was neighborhood politics no more. This was personal. The war had begun. The certified letter from Scott Patterson's law firm just sat on my kitchen counter like a gun loaded. Lily picked it, woke up one morning early before school, her inquisitive eyes reading the official letter. "Had Dad, is this regarding our cabin?" she asked, her voice tiny and hesitant. I removed the letter from her hands and put it back on the counter, attempting to maintain my expression neutral. "Yes, honey, but don't worry about it. Some people just don't get how much this cabin means to us. I kissed the top of her head and handed her the lunch I'd prepared. Remember what Mom always used to say, don't let the turkeys get you down. That raised a smile on her face as she went off to catch the bus once. By myself, I let out the annoyed sigh I'd been holding in. The letter had thinly veiled threats about encroachment on established aesthetic standards, and in anticipation of immediate injunctive relief. These legal terms were intended to scare, but they made me more determined. That afternoon, I visited Jessica at her office downtown. The walls were filled with law books and framed diplomas, a reflection of her proficiency in real estate law. "This is harassment, plain and simple," she said after reading the letter. "And my property records, your land extends past the HO line, as per the original plat maps." Amber is stretching it. She pushed her glasses up onto her nose and leaned in. "But Matthew, you need to know something. HOAs can do a lot of damage even when they're in the wrong, and Amber clearly intends to make an example out of you." I nodded, recognizing the undertone, because I've never been averse to showing fear of her. "Like the others do," Jessica smiled. "Riley, exactly. You're the first person who hasn't backed down in her mind. That makes you dangerous." We discussed options, deciding that I would continue construction while Jessica prepared counter-arguments to any legal action they might take as I was leaving. Jessica added one more thing. "Document everything, Matthew. Every conversation, every letter, every step of construction. We may need it based on her recommendation." I had security cameras installed around the construction area and kept working on the foundation of the cabin. George assisted me in finding good quality lumber at a discounted price, and we progressed steadily over the next few weeks. In the meantime, Amber's harassment campaign continued to escalate. She started calling the county offices near daily, reporting non-existent code violations. My coworkers would roll their eyes and inform me during lunch. She phoned again, insisting your foundation is 6 and too close to water. Maxwell Thompson, my direct supervisor at age 52 at the planning department, one day told me, "We've already inspected and approved it twice." I was grateful for Max's defense, but I could see the effect these constant complaints were mounting on the department. During one of my routine inspections for another property, I happened to observe something interesting. Brett Wilson, Amber's right-hand man in the HOA, had an unpermitted swimming pool in his backyard. I noted it, but did not file a report. I still wanted to settle this matter amicably if possible. The next Tuesday, I had to attend an all-day training session at the county office. Lily had been home from school with a slight fever at noon. I got a frantic call from her dad. "Mrs. Patterson is here with Mr. Wilson and some other folks. They're attempting to inspect our backyard and the lake area. I told them you weren't home, but they won't go away." I excused myself right away from the training and called Jessica on my route to the car. "I'm on my way there now, but can you pick me up?" This is trespassing. When I came home, 15 minutes later, Amber and her crew were still lingering. Standing at the boundary of my property, looking out toward the lake and the half-built cabin foundation, Lily was watching nervously from the kitchen window. "What do you think you're doing on my land?" I asked, my voice firm but steady. Amber turned, not even having the decency to be embarrassed. "Performing an HOA inspection. It's within our rights, not without notice, not without me." And certainly not on property outside your jurisdiction, I retorted. Brett moved in his gym owner. Physique aimed to intimidate. We've had complaints regarding your building project. I looked around tactfully, from whom there are no neighbors within 100 yards in that direction. Amber's eyes narrowed behind her large sunglasses. Your daughter was extremely rude to us. Matthew, you should teach her some respect for authority. That was it. I could handle their harassment of me. But involving my daughter crossed a line. My daughter knows to be cautious of trespassers. Now get off my property before I threaten to call the sheriff and get a restraining order. Jessica's car arrived just then, lending seriousness to my threat. Amber looked back and forth between us, then at her friends. Let's go, we've had enough. As they walked away, I could hear her say, this isn't over, not by a long shot. That night, after putting Lily into bed with a chapter of her favorite book, I took her in. I found her unusually quiet. Dad, she finally said, Mrs. Patterson said some mean things about you today. She said you think you're above the rules and that you're going to get in trouble at work. I sat on the edge of her bed, my heart aching. Honey, sometimes adults say unkind things when they don't get their way. Mrs. Patterson is upset because I'm not letting her tell us what to do with our property, but I promise you everything I'm doing is completely legal. Lily nodded, but I could see she was still worried. Is she going to stop us from building Mom's cabin? The vulnerability in her voice almost broke me. No, I said firmly, pushing her hair back from her forehead. Nobody's going to prevent us from fulfilling our promise to Mom. Some things are worth fighting for, and this is one of them at the next HOA meeting. I confronted Amber head on, keeping my tone steady in spite of my anger. Stay away from my daughter. Whatever the problem you have with me, you keep it to yourself. The room was quiet, observing the standoff. Amber smiled, clicking her pen against the podium. Is that a threat, Mr. Miller, since I have friends in high places on the county board members? It would be a shame if your professional acumen were called into question. The threat to my job dangled in the air. Just smiled in return. I've been fairly enforcing land use regulations for 15 years. Amber, my track record is apparent because as I was leaving the meeting, Olivia Stewart, a 41-year-old school teacher and reluctant HOA member, caught up with me. Sorry about all this, Matthew. Not everyone is in agreement with the way she's doing things. I nodded in appreciation, but I was starting to comprehend that this disagreement was going to be worse before it would be better tomorrow. At the workplace, I learned that somebody had opened my file on the cabin project and modified some of the measurements in the documents changes that would make it look like I'd broken setback rules. The security log indicated the files were opened using Maxwell Thompson's credentials. Despite denying it, someone had either breached the system or coerced him into it that evening, getting back home late. After clearing the file, tampering, I discovered my building materials, vandalized bags of cement, opened and exposed to rain and costly wood. Destroyed the security cameras, had been disabled in a strange manner, waiting in the rain and seeing the devastation. I had a cold anger settle over me if this was how they wanted to play. Then the gloves were coming off the morning after they found the vandalism. I went to the hardware store in the morning before going to work. George Edwards was already there making coffee behind the counter as I reported the vandalism. His weathered face grew darker. Never did like that hoe crowd, he grunted. What are you going to do? I thought about the question. Install better security cameras to begin with, and I'm not halting the building. George went off into the back room with a box. Military-grade security cameras, waterproof night vision uploads straight to cloud storage when I went to get my wallet. He shooed me away. Consider it my bit for justice. Your Claire was a good woman. She should be able to have her cabin constructed with George's assistance. And I installed the new cameras and sent for replacement materials. Working on the cabin was my way of defiance. It was on one of these afternoons that Amber took things further. A small group of HOA members came to the perimeter of my property with signs regarding protect property values and no rustic eyes. They staged what they likely believed was a protest, photographing and documenting my transgressions. I continued working, having ignored them altogether after an hour they had dispersed, but not before Amber had cried out, "We've made a formal complaint to the county planning department. Matthew, this time you will not be able to hide behind your status." The following day, I was served an official letter from the planning department signed by Maxwell Thompson that my permits had to be re-examined due to complaints raised by residents. I marched straight to Max's office. "What is this about, Max? You know, every inch of that cabin. Plan is up to code." Max couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry. Matthew Commissioner Davis requested the review, personally. He plays golf with Scott Patterson." The pieces clicked into place. Amber was using her husband's connections to put pressure on the department. As I departed from his office, my phone rang. It was Jessica. "We must speak." I had found something unusual regarding the HOA's boundaries. By that time, the cabin stood at around 60% completion. The skeleton structure was in place. The roof was on, and we were preoccupied with the windows and the interior. Jessica had found through her research that the HOA had expanded its boundaries 5 years ago in a silent manner without due notice to everyone, hurt property owners a legally dubious step at best on a drizzly Thursday morning. Max summoned me to an emergency meeting at the planning department. When I got there, the conference room was crowded with a number of officials, including Commissioner Davis, Mr. Miller. He started, "We've had a formal complaint filed about your permit approvals. The complainant alleges there's a conflict of interest in you, approving building on your own land." I kept calm, explaining I had done things by the book with the right approvals. By Senior Planner Roberts. Not me. Halfway through the meeting, my phone rang constantly. It was Lily. I went outside to take the call. "Dad," her voice was frantic. "There are people here with trucks and equipment. They're dismantling the cabin. They told me they have HOA authorization." My blood froze. "Lily, remain in the house." Call. "Jessica, right away, I'm coming." I ran back inside. "Commissioner, while we've been sitting here talking about paperwork, the HOA has sent a demolition crew to my property without any legal right. I broke all the speed limits driving home with Max riding behind me when we got there. A private demolition crew had dismantled half the cabin's frame." Amber stood waiting with satisfaction. Brett at her side, Lily was on the porch, tears streaming down her face while Jessica yelled angrily at the crew foreman, "Stop this right now!" I yelled, "You have no legal right to be on my land." The man produced a document with HO letterhead. "Not a county demolition notice. This is not a legal document that permits demolition. You are trespassing and damaging private property." Max moved forward, displaying his county ID. "I'm the director of the planning department. No demolition permits have ever been issued at this address. You must shut down at once." The foreman hesitated between glancing at Max and Amber, who addressed with feigned naivety. "There has to be some confusion. We were merely applying our HOA rules." I turned to confront her. "This lot is beyond your HOA authority. This is criminal trespass, property, damage, and fraud." Brett stepped in, standing between us. "Watch your words, Miller. If you meddle in HOA business, we'll have the sheriff take you away." His bluff was ridiculous. "Please," I said, "call the sheriff. I'd like to tell you how you're tearing down property without a county permit." The standoff got heated, with the demolition team standing uncomfortably near their machinery, Amber watching her scheme collapse. Altered tactics. "All right, stop for now, but this isn't finished. Matthew, the HOA board has voted unanimously that this building is against our community standards." As if on cue, the last part of the frame of the cabin fell apart with a nauseating snap, sending wooden beams crashing toward the lake. Lily emitted a faint cry on the porch. I turned to Amber, my voice icy calm in contrast to my anger. "You've just made the most critical mistake of your life," she smirked. "We'll see about that later that night, after filing with both county commissioners and the sheriff's department." I sat beside Lily on the porch swing. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands grasping one of Claire's old sweaters. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do to stop them." I wrapped my arms around her. "You did the right thing, calling me and Jessica. This isn't your fault." She gazed out at the devastation, splintered, wood-scattered materials, the exposed partial foundation. "To the things are we giving up?" she whispered. I looked where she looked, to the destroyed cabin, then to Slaw's beloved maple tree close by. "No," I said with conviction. "We are not giving up, but there are times when you're trying to battle people who don't play fair, that you have to try a different plan." I saw resolve replace the sadness in her eyes like chess. "You taught me sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the game." I smiled. "Exactly like chess. Honey, and guess what? They just sacrificed their queen without knowing it. At the time Whispering Pines was formed in 2003, plainly do not encompass the lakefront properties Jessica demonstrated by holding up an old map. Then in 2003-2018, they submitted this amendment that added their jurisdiction to cover the lakefront, but without receiving the necessary 75% homeowner support. I nodded, and my property happens to be right in that disputed zone. Jessica smiled grimly. Precisely, the amendment is legally dubious, at best fraudulent, at worst Monday morning. I got to the county offices early as land permit director. I had rightful access to all building records. I methodically checked every permit and inspection report for Whispering Pines' properties over the last 5 years. By lunchtime, I had made a telling list. Brett Wilson's unauthorized swimming pool without necessary safety fencing. Amber's basement gym room conversion finished without electrical permits, and the same infractions for 6 other HOA board members or associates. Even more intriguing was Amber's recent request for a large home addition, an indoor pool and recreation area that would add outside her property's setback regulation. The application should have been denied outright for several code infractions, but it was under review by a new employee who answered directly to Commissioner Davis, skipping regular channels that night. Jessica called with her own findings. I've been speaking with former HOA members who relocated 3 different families, spoke of financial improprieties during Amber's reign. She's been utilizing HOA money for personal research excursions to high-end resorts. One past treasurer quit when he questioned such expenditures. Amber threatened to place a lien on my home because my garden shed was allegedly the incorrect color of brown. She claims she's bullied half the neighborhood by intimidation and discriminatory enforcement. George utilized his community ties to dig up the Pattersons' past. They've done it before. They've lived in 3 various HOA communities, each time working their way onto the board, followed by active enforcement and eventual confrontation. Before they have been sued twice by former neighbors, Max Thompson asked to have a private meeting off county property. Commissioner Davis pulled me into his office before your permits were brought into question. He admitted he said Scott Patterson had issues with your project and opined that it would be in the department's best interest to discover issues with your application. I should have confronted him, but my daughter just graduated from college and I cannot lose this job. This was grave, a county commissioner misusing his office for a personal grudge. That evening, gazing at the cabin ruins, I weighed my possibilities as land permit director. I had the discretion to authorize property inspections. With code offenses, I had exercised this power responsibly all along. But now, with documented violations on my desk, I had the tools to expose the HOA board's hypocrisy. Lily caught me on the porch past midnight. Dad, recall what Mom used to say regarding bullies, that they only have power when people are fearful. I smiled. She was correct as always. Lily yawned. So perhaps it's time to tell them we're not scared anymore. The following morning, Lily presented to me detailed sketches of a rebuilt cabin. I've been thinking about how to reconstruct it better. She said, her energy remembered me. Why this struggle meant so much. These are gorgeous, honey, I said her, and we'll rebuild it. She glanced upwards. But first we have to deal with Mrs. Patterson, right? I nodded to the whiteboard where our plan, yes, and I think it's time to quit playing defense. She tracked my eye to the list of 8 HOA violations that we had uncovered. Sometimes justice requires a nudge from people who know how to use the system. Monday morning, I entered my office with fresh resolve. I gave my assistant the first folder of documents on Brett Wilson's unapproved swimming pool. This is for a safety inspection, unapproved pool, effectively lacking proper fencing, a serious offense given the elementary school in close proximity by noon. Official notices had been sent to Brett and 5 other HOA board members, or Amber's supporters, all for legitimate infraction. I ensured each inspection was delegated to our most diligent inspectors. Brett burst into my office that afternoon, waving the inspection notice. What the hell is this? I looked up calmly. Standard procedure for unpermitted structures? Mr. Wilson, particularly those of a safety nature. He leaned over my desk. We both know what you're doing, Miller. This is retaliation. I remain professional, actually. It's enforcement of county building codes. Something your OA claims to hold in esteem. Your pool does not have the necessary safety. Fence has no self-closing gate with the color drained from his face. The inspection will be tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. As he was leaving, I heard him on the phone. Amber, we have a problem. The inspections led to violation notices for all 6 properties, with fines of more than $20,000 they were offered. The same choices they had offered to me, bring the buildings into compliance or take them down. Amber called for an emergency HOA meeting, which I attended with Jessica, and some 30 other homeowners. Word had gotten around about the inspection crackdown. Amber stood at the podium, gesticulating over the top. This is a blatant abuse of power. Matthew Miller is employing his role to carry out a vendetta against board members who were merely upholding our community standards. When she stopped to breathe, I raised my hand peacefully. May I get to respond to these accusations walking up front? I clarified. Every inspection was done to standard procedure based on written code violations, the same standards. The HOA purports to enforce. I turned to address the neighbors. But there's a more basic problem. Many of you might not be aware that in 2018, the HOA board led by Mrs. Patterson widened its boundaries to encompass lakefront homes, including mine, without seeking the necessary homeowner approval. Mirror spread as I circulated copies of the original boundaries and the dubious amendment. This implies not only was the HOA action against my cabin illegal, but it could bring into question other decisions for properties in areas of conflict. The session got out of hand as residents challenged Amber regarding changes to boundaries and biased enforcement. Olivia Stewart rose to her feet. I believe we have a right to know how our fees are being utilized as well. If some were used towards unauthorized destruction of property beyond HOA jurisdiction, Amber's makeup could not conceal the rage. This session is adjourned, she announced, banging her gavel on the table and storming off in a huff with Brett and his minions. The other homeowners huddled around Jessica and me, relating their own HOA overreaching experiences. By evening's end, 20 homeowners were willing to sign affidavit regarding Amber's mismanagement and intimidating behaviors. The following morning, I wrote a formal letter to all Whispering Pines' homes, outlining boundary manipulation, financial improprieties, and selective enforcement during Amber's tenure. By lunchtime, Amber herself crashed into my office. You've blown it, Miller, she spit. You think you can make my own neighborhood turn on me? I built Whispering Pines into what it is today. I relaxed back, unimpressed. Actually, you've managed to do a fantastic job of getting people to turn against you all by yourself. I'm merely pointing out that she stabbed her finger in my direction. I will ruin your career. Scott is out golfing with the county executive director this weekend. How long do you think you'll be employed? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thick file prior to issuing additional threats. You might want to read this. I unfolded hundreds of pages of documented violations, financial improprieties, and sworn affidavits from neighbors, her eyes scanning the pages, the harsh reality slowly dawning. Her voice softened. Matthew, surely we can work something out. Perhaps there was a mutual understanding. She brought out her checkbook. The HOA might pay you for the cabin, say $25,000 in return for dropping this misunderstanding. She hadn't known Jessica had given me a tape recorder. Picking up each word, are you giving me a bribe, Mrs. Patterson? She hastily retreated. Not a bribe, damages compensation. I got up. I believe this discussion is finished. Please channel further communication via legal means. Her face changed back to anger. You'll regret this, Matthew. I guarantee you'll vanish from this county forever. As she stormed away, I ended the recording and made digital duplicates immediately during the day. I was notified by the County Ethics Committee that I was being investigated for alleged conflicts of interest in permit approvals. The complaint was anonymous, but clearly of Amber, probably through her husband's contacts. The investigation would temporarily limit my capacity to issue permits, including HOA-related ones that I had just referenced. As I drove home, I called Jessica. They're attempting to bind my hands. An ethics probe can take months. Jessica wasn't discouraged. Then we speed up our timeline. I've drafted the injunction against the HOA based on the boundary manipulation, and with this day's recording, we can now add attempted bribery of a county official to the charges. I smiled in spite of the tension. You know what Claire used to say about chess? The greatest players are thinking 5 moves ahead. Jessica laughed. Well then, let's make our next move. Count the county board meeting room was standing room only. The conflict of interest hearing about my permit approvals had become the most highly anticipated county government. Function in years, Amber and Scott Patterson occupied the front row. Scott in a suit, Amber in a dress that clashed with her excessive makeup. Brett Wilson and other HOA board members huddled near them. Across sat Jessica Lily George, and at least 30 Whispering Pines residents standing with me, including Olivia Stewart. Commissioner Davis adjourned the meeting to order describing the hearing's purpose. Scott Patterson stepped up to the podium and delivered a story making me out to be a rogue official who misused my office, then took revenge on concerned citizens who upheld community standards. He depicted Amber as a committed volunteer who was trying to uphold property values and the HOA as victims of my vendettas. When it was my turn, I walked to the podium composedly. Thank you, Commissioner Davis and board members, for allowing me to speak regarding these charges. I systematically took down the conflict of interest accusation, having evidence revealing my permit request had taken the correct process. I laid out the chronology from the construction of the cabin in the first place, through the HOA harassment leading up to the illegal raising, then turned to what we're actually discussing is not a conflict of interest, but an abuse of power, not on my part, but by an HOA that illegally expanded its boundaries and used intimidation tactics to enforce rules on properties outside its jurisdiction. Commissioner Davis tried to interrupt Mr. Miller. Please confine your comments to the specific allegations. I nodded respectfully, with all due respect. Commissioner, these issues are inseparable. I went on to provide evidence of the HOA boundary manipulation and responded to the targeted inspections I had authorized as land permit director. It is my responsibility to uphold building codes for all of the residents without discrimination. When I became aware of serious safety violations, I took standard procedure, the same that would be used on any property in the county. Lily abruptly stood up. Can I say something? Please, she asked. Commissioner Davis nodded. Lily walked in front with such great poise. My name is Lily Miller. The cabin my dad was constructing was my mom's dream. After she passed away from cancer 3 years ago, it wasn't some huge mansion that would obstruct views or be problematic. It was going to be a little cabin where we could feel near to her again. Her voice trembled a little. Mrs. Patterson and her friends arrived when my dad was not at home and destroyed it. They did not care about the vow he made to my mother. They did not care about how much it meant to me. They just wanted to win. The simpleness and emotional sincerity of her declaration lingered in the air. Even Commissioner Davis appeared touched. The momentum seemed to be shifting when Scott Patterson requested to present new evidence documents, suggesting I had fast-tracked permits for friends while delaying those for HOA board members. Amber looked triumphant. Commissioner Davis called a recess to review the materials during the break. Jessica whispered, "Those documents look altered. The timestamps don't match our records." When the hearing resumed, I requested that the original digital records be drawn from the county database. A flash of concern crossed Scott's face as an IT specialist was called for. Jessica handed out packets to every board member with records of the HOA's illegal boundary expansion, financial improprieties, and witness accounts regarding intimidation strategies. Further, I have information that Mrs. Patterson tried to bribe a county official, in particular Mr. Miller, to abandon legitimate actions regarding code enforcement, that she had played the taping of my office call with Amber. The color leached from Amber's face as her own voice echoed clearly, proposing money for dropping the investigations. The IT expert came back with the original permit records, which indicated that Scott's documents had in fact been tampered with. I want to know who accessed and tampered with these records, I said, gazing directly to Commissioner Davis. At the next brief recess, Olivia Stewart walked up with 5 other residents asking to speak regarding the HOA's management techniques. When the hearing reconvened, the atmosphere had entirely changed. Board members were now inquiring pointed questions regarding the HOA's behavior. Instead of my alleged infractions, homeowners provided testimony regarding Amber's selective enforcement intimidation strategies and HOA fund abuse. The most incriminating testimony was given by a former HOA treasurer who had resigned due to financial improprieties. Mrs. Patterson approved reimbursement to herself for research visits to high-end resorts with no discernible benefit to the community. He clarified when I asked questions about these expenses. I was taken off the finance committee. Amber's serene facade cracked. She interrupted repeatedly until Commissioner Davis threatened she would be taken off if she couldn't keep her cool. After 3 hours of testimony, the board went into closed session. When they returned, Commissioner Davis read their decision regarding the conflict of interest allegations against Matthew Miller. The board finds insufficient evidence to support these claims. All proper protocols were followed in the permit approval process. He continued, however, the evidence presented today raises serious concerns about the Whispering Pines, HOA's governance boundary claims, and enforcement procedures. The board is calling for an investigation of the facts regarding such actions, and in the meantime temporarily withdrawing the HOA's power to act until such times as a result. The board suggests Mrs. Patterson resign, effective at once. Amber got up, her face twisted into a rage. "You can't do that, will sue." Commissioner Davis slammed his gavel. "Mrs. Patterson, calm yourself or you'll be taken from the building at the meeting recess." Neighbors hugged me, congratulating and supporting me. Many apologized for not standing up to Amber earlier. Jessica was already talking about setting up an interim HOA board with Olivia as the probable temporary president. Through the crowd, I saw Amber and Scott heading towards the exit, most of their previous supporters now shunning them for a moment. Amber's eyes met mine, her face a combination of anger and incredulity that her power structure had fallen so utterly. I didn't experience the gratification I had anticipated, just a quiet assurance that justice had finally been done. The weeks after the county hearing brought swift changes. The Pattersons were hit with several repercussions. The county investigation revealed more than $30,000 in questionable reimbursements to Amber for research that seemed to be personal getaways. Brett Wilson and other board members were handed heavy fines for violating building codes. Most gratifying was the civil ruling that obligated the Pattersons to pay complete restitution for the knockdown cabin, plus damages close to $70,000. Jessica had fought the case aggressively, and the judge was especially unsympathetic. Following hearing the tape-recorded bribe attempt, Olivia Stewart rose up as acting HOA president, serving with a new board to renew bylaws and reinstate original neighborhood boundaries. "We were more concerned with being good neighbors than property police," she told the first community meeting. Nearly 80% of the homeowners came out, a record turnout. I attended as a typical resident, providing the occasional permit advice, but otherwise happy to simply be another neighbor. At the county offices, changes were underway too. Commissioner Davis had taken a lengthy leave of absence after these questions regarding his involvement in document tampering. Maxwell Thompson had been candid about the pressure he'd experienced, giving testimony that led to the commissioner's connection with the Pattersons. Max visited my office, appearing more at ease than I'd seen him in months. "I wish to apologize once again. Matthew, I ought to have stood up to Commissioner from the very start." I brushed aside his apology. "What counts is that you acted right in the end." He nodded and smiled. "By the way, I signed off on your new cabin. Permits myself all. Okay, whenever you're ready to rebuild." 6 weeks after the hearing, a for sale sign showed up in front of the Pattersons' residence. There were rumors Scott had taken a job in a different state, a lateral promotion, according to his report, although the majority thought it was due to reputation damage they'd incurred. Brett Wilson also jumped into the mix, listing his residence for much lower than similar residences, desperate for an immediate sale, as Jessica put it over dinner. It's amazing how quickly a power structure can collapse once people stop being afraid. Construction on the new cabin began in early spring, almost exactly a year after the original project started. This time, I found myself with abundant help. George organized volunteers from his hardware store customers, and my county colleagues' neighbors provided help on weekends. Some with building skills, others providing food for workers. Even Max Thompson arrived in old jeans and a t-shirt, willing to lend a hand with framing what started as my own project had become a community project, representing the renewal of the neighborhood. Lily confidently led volunteers through her designs, describing her vision for various spaces. I found myself frequently looking at her with pride and wistfulness, wondering how much Claire would have adored seeing her like this. Jessica became a constant presence through construction, at first providing legal counsel regarding easements, but later just delivering coffee and working with us. Our friendship had grown through the conflict and had become something that felt more and more like more than friendship. One night, as we sat on the half-finished porch and watched the sunset, she asked, "Do you ever get to thinking about how sometimes the worst things can lead to things good unexpected?" I nodded, knowing precisely what she had meant. Claire would say that life will take you on detours that ultimately get you where you need to be. Jessica's hand slipped into mine as we went on watching the sunset. Lily, seeing us from where she had been setting up stones for a path, smiled to herself before making her way stealthily to the opposite side of the building site. By midsummer, the cabin was beginning to shape up a stunning building with huge windows framing the lake view just right. Claire's presence could be seen everywhere, from the color scheme she had once drawn out to special details Lily had added from her recollections one afternoon. As I was putting in window trim, George came bearing a special delivery, a hand-carved wooden sign with Miller's Promise, with Claire's favorite hummingbird carved in the corner. "It's perfect," I said to him, my voice full of emotion. The finished cabin's grand opening fell on the whispering pine summer block party, a neighborhood tradition revived under the new HOA. Leadership neighbors strolled between the main activities and tours of the finished cabin. Olivia Stewart, now officially elected HOA president, welcomed us with a lovely wind chime. "We wanted something that would remind you of the community's support whenever the wind blows," she said as the party went on into the evening. Jessica, Lily, and I stole a moment of privacy in the cabin. Lily draped the final of Claire's photographs, one showing all three of us laughing on a beach holiday years ago, in a recessed shelf specially constructed. "Do you think Mom would like it?" she asked. I slipped my arm around her shoulders. "She would adore it, honey, every inch of it." Jessica squeezed my other hand. "I never got to meet Claire, but I feel like I know her through this space. Her soul is in every line." Later that evening, Jessica and I sat on the porch swing and watched the moonlight shining on the lake. "I've been thinking about how much differently everything could have gone if Ember had simply left your cabin by herself," she said, breaking the comfortable silence between us. I nodded in consideration of the chain of events precipitated by that first angry encounter. She never realized that some things are worth struggling for, no matter the price. I gazed out the window at sleeping Lily, Claire's picture, standing watch over her. Then again to the woman beside me, a love I never thought to find again the cabin. Yes, but so much more: promises, principles, community, the things that truly do matter. The next weekend, George came by with a last edition, a small wooden carving box. After he was gone, I opened it and discovered a little wooden gavel with the inscription, "Justice sometimes requires knowing how to sign permits." I had laughed out loud at the exact summarization of our triumph. The journey to rebuilding the cabin had been considerably tougher than I had ever imagined. What started as a mere construction endeavor had grown into a struggle against corruption and misuse of authority. Then the rebuilding of not just a building but a community. Sitting on the porch, gazing out over the serene lake, as sunset, I felt Claire's presence more keenly than I had in years. "We did it," I breathed to the evening wind. "We kept our promise." And somewhere in that instant, between the soft lapping of waves on the shore and the initial stars showing in the fading sky, I could hear her say, "I never doubted you would." This tale may be done, but HOA Vibes has an entire vault full of chaos waiting.